Hey guys, Liana here. It's Tatas Tuesday. Tatas Tuesday. Wait, Liana, why are you talking about boys and video games on Tatas Tuesday? Because this article and video are about boys talking about girls regarding video games, hence Tatas Tuesday. I know, sneaky, tricksy hobbitses. But yeah, this was suggested to me by someone on Twitter, and I'm always appreciative when people suggest topics on Twitter. I like the engagement. I like knowing what people are interested in hearing more about. It helps me because I don't have to guess, but also it allows me to focus on more like close analytical work and less about trying to figure out how to present a topic, because if people are already familiar with the topic, then that means I can sort of dig right in. Now, that being said, I want to set this up a little bit because this is an article by Rosalind Wiseman, and the background on Rosalind Wiseman is that she is, ironically enough, one of the queen bees of feminist youth research. She wrote the book Queen Bees and Wannabes, hence the irony of her becoming a queen bee. But ironically, her own sort of thing, her own theory has become sort of true, in that, for those of you who don't know, Queen Bees and Wannabes was the inspiration for the movie Mean Girls, I think, yes. But obviously there's a lot more Tina Fey in the Mean Girls movie. But Rosalind Wiseman has decided to now study the impact of video games on youth culture. And I'm not sure how she can study the impact of video games on youth culture, seeing as this is an ongoing phenomenon. We can't, unless she's going to go and get a sample from kids who don't play video games and compare the two. Well, you know, we don't have a control sample. But this is, I'm digressing here. This is just my personal, interesting how this is set up. The reason I call Wiseman a queen bee in this case is I think that she is having an undue influence on the dialogue involving games because of her feminist credentials. And, you know, those of you who know, the whole queen bee phenomenon is those girls who sort of set the social dynamics in a micro group, in a microcosm. And so it's very ironic the way this is being treated, because the people that have read her books are not really applying that. Now, that being said, she's come up with some interesting results here, and I don't think the people spreading this information realize what they have regarding Wiseman's results. Now, well, let's run the video, and we can talk after the fact about her conclusions about this. Now, I have to refresh it because for some odd reason it doesn't play once I pause it, but here we go. Come on. Sponsor message.
This is Rosalind Wiseman, and for the last 4 years, I've been studying video games' influence on youth culture.
4 whole years,
Pretty
huh?
quickly, I realized that the gaming industry publishers
right off
had
the
assumptions
bat.
about young people's opinions.
Gaming impact on youth culture, and they start showing us a montage of M-rated games that are not supposed to be played by minors without parental consent. This is the first thing I kind of went, huh? Because if you're a gamer, you catch that right away, right? There are games for youth and games for adults, and part of the issue we have with gaming is there aren't enough games made for youth that are appropriate for youth, because the vast majority of gamers are adults. And that's just the reality of the market. The age is starting to come down now for the first time. It was steadily rising for a while, but these games are made for adults. Young people are not supposed to be playing them unless their parents have determined they are wise beyond their years.
That were really different than what I was hearing from young people. So in 2014, in collaboration...
And now we've got a game. Did you catch the vault number? Vault 111. Fallout 4 isn't even out yet, guys.
With my colleagues Charlie Kuhn and gaming expert Ashley Birch, we surveyed over 1,400 middle and high school students throughout the country. And here are some of our findings.
In Game of War, Kate Upton plays like Athena, and she's barely wearing any clothes. This game is played by kids, and I don't know any kids who want to see that.
All right. Charming little 13-year-old urchin reinforcing sex negative, I'll even say patriarchal views about what women are supposed to wear. That was a classic cover up if you want to be respectable attitude, wasn't it? And I'm going to proceed very cautiously because it's a 13-year-old. But let's look at what they determined was Kate Upton wearing almost nothing. That her midriff is fully covered. I mean, by Kim Kardashian standards, this would be prudish, right? Look at the messages that the culture is sending to 13-year-old girls, that this is trashy. Why? Because she has cleavage. Not necessarily because of what she's wearing, because of the body within what she's wearing. If a smaller busted woman was wearing this costume, there would be no issue. So we have a 13-year-old who has been encouraged to body shame. And what kid wants to play that? None. Well, I think she's right there. You know, kids don't, or what kid wants to see that? Kids haven't developed sexual attraction for the opposite sex or the same sex yet. Kids have not started to have that part of their brain awaken. But kids, you ate from that for the early part in your life. They have been trained to be disgusted by this. And that was the first cause I had for concern. But let's hope it'll play again and keep going, because we got a boy now.
And it's called Mortal Kombat. And
13-year-old playing Mortal Kombat, and they didn't think that might be the issue.
I really like it, but I noticed that a lot of the female characters are wearing very scantily clad clothing. I just thought that it's kind of polluting young kids' brains to think that this is how they should dress.
47%.
All right. It's polluting young kids' brains that this is how they should dress. First of all, Mortal Kombat, M-rated game, absolutely not for children. So I'm not going to criticize a 13-year-old on that assumption, but it's a false assumption. The other thing is that the women, he focuses on the women, or who knows what he actually said. This is what these video makers have decided to focus on. They should really cover up. Well, let's look at the men of Mortal Kombat, right? There's Liu Kang. He has absolutely nothing on the upper half of his body except for forearm gauntlets. And this is no indication of a lack of self-respect in the male characters of Mortal Kombat. And ironically, I found another group of men who dress very, very similar to Liu Kang, the cast of Magic Mike. But we're encouraging our youth to focus on what the women in video games are wearing and fixate and criticize on what the women in video games are wearing, and not show similar scrutiny to the fact that society permits men to go shirtless without social stigma. Why is it okay? Why does it not warp the minds of children to have Liu Kang wearing no shirt, but those, Kitana's costume and Sindel and Jade's costumes, why are those seen as negative? Because they have been taught the social significance of men and women's dress. And I'll go back to this. Liu Kang, male strippers. Liu Kang, male strippers. If these were women, people would be freaking out, right? And I bet if these were women on a movie ad, they'd probably be wearing less than what Sindel and Kitana were wearing in those ads. Interesting, isn't it? When you actually break it down and when you actually start looking at this stuff. Let's keep going.
Of middle school boys agreed, and 61% of high school boys agreed that female characters are treated too often as sex objects in games.
Again, God of War, a game that middle school and high school boys should not be playing unless their parents decide they're ready for it.
And a widely held assumption in the industry
Mass Effect, M-rated game.
is that boys
And what was wrong with Miranda's outfit right there? She was fully clothed.
only want to play male characters. It's one of the reasons the gaming industry says that they are reluctant to develop more strong female characters. What we found out was that 70% of girls and 78% of boys said it doesn't matter what gender the character they play is.
Just to stop there, this isn't a criticism. This is what gamers have been saying for years. They really don't care as long as it's a good character. But we're back to Fallout again, a game that's not out.
Interestingly,
And Fallout is a game where you can choose whether you play as a man or a woman.
boys care less about playing a male character as they age, and girls care more about playing a female one. I know this may
That was an interesting bit, that men care less about playing the gender of their character as they age, and women care more. That would imply that there are larger social issues at play that influence that decision. But we're almost done here, guys, and then we'll get to some general observations.
seem insignificant because this is games we're talking about, but it does matter because it's an important part of our culture that is sending hypersexualized depictions of women onto the phone, computer, and TV screens of millions of boys and girls. Our kids deserve better, and it's what they want.
All right. So, you can watch that whole thing if it was too choppy for you. Here's the URL up here. You can go and find it. I'll try to put the link in the video as well. But let's break down what we just saw here. There's a whole thing on the video as well, and the I would respect the female character in Mortal Kombat for having some dignity. And all those lovely comments about how women should cover up, but who cares if men do. I think there's a really great bonus for gaming here because, strangely, video games are supposed to be cultivating negative attitudes about women to impressionable minds, and here are 13-year-olds, middle school boys, high school boys who have grown up their entire life under the influence of video games, and we don't have a problem here. So, in terms of studying the impact of video games on our youth, well, where's the problem? Where's the problem if video games are supposed to turn boys into these sex-crazed, maniacs? Well, that's not happening. I don't think that giving boys power to judge what girls are wearing is healthy. I don't think this is something that should be encouraged. I think that instead of saying, I would respect the female character more for having some dignity regarding Mortal Kombat, that just shows that kid is too young to be playing Mortal Kombat. Because if you don't think Kitana has dignity, if you don't think Sonya has dignity, you really aren't getting the context of the game. Melina's a villain and Sindel's a villain, and you have to factor in the fact that, a lot of the dress codes, are, impacted by other factors such as, slavery. And so, yeah, they look like slave girl outfits because guess what? And to me, that just says that this game is above the 8th grader who was asked to comment on this, which it is. And this 8th grader should be sat down and taught that what a woman wears is not necessarily an indication of her dignity. It has to do with, time and place and the purpose of that. And I speak, as someone who did competitive dance as a young person. And while our dance instructors were trying to beat into us, don't wear underwear under your costumes and don't do this and don't do that, we want a particular look for the stage, we'd get that message as dance professionals. And then we'd go to school and hear, the teenage boys go, she doesn't wear underwear, she's a slut, and things like that. And these are the mixed messages that impact youth in a negative way. It's very confusing to one's sense of self to hear you're supposed to do something for professional purposes in a theatrical or professional sphere that's going to get you called a slut when you go to school. That is the conflict facing teenage girls and increasingly teenage boys getting mixed messages about sexuality. And, case in point, okay? And we'll go back to Liu Kang. Let's just take all the Mortal Kombat guys who don't have shirts and animate them into a Magic Mike thing, because all of a sudden that stops being oppressive to women, and because movie studios say so, suddenly become some feminist statement. And that's marketing for you folks. And that's sort of the other things, I think, saying 47% of middle school boys agreed that if women are objectified like this, it defeats, if 47% of middle school boys agreed that female characters are treated too often as sexual objects. Well, 47% isn't a majority where I come from. So what did the other 53% believe? 61% of high school boys. I think 61% of high school boys recognize you're supposed to say this. But asking a 13-year-old boy or a 12-year-old boy, because I think that's when they start middle school now, isn't it? I have trouble because I skipped a grade in primary school. So the year I hit various, the school milestones, I was a year younger than everybody else. So I have trouble with this. But, asking middle school boys what they think about boobies, some of these middle school boys have not hit the point in their development where boobies are like, yeah, or, or if they hit that point at all. Obviously, we're not being heteronormative here. But 61% of high school boys saying women are treated too often as sex objects. If this is a totally blind study where people's names aren't on it, and it will not get back to these high school boys, I give it more weight than what they showed in that video, which is kids talking to camera, assumedly with grown-ups staring at them and asking questions. Teenagers are very, very good at telling you what they think you want to hear, right? They're very good at echoing back the statements that adults have given them. And the idea of a sex object is, is a slippery slope. Do I think that the women of Mortal Kombat are treated as sex objects in their games? No, they're fighters. This objectivity theory and gaze theory and all that stuff, they've infiltrated the popular culture, absolutely. But, I've talked about this before and I won't belabor this much longer, but who is a 16-year-old boy to tell a 16-year-old girl what to wear? That has implications beyond just video games. That has implications of the male attitude dictating female behavior. And that's the very sort of thing that feminism is supposed to be not trying to stamp out, but question. Like, is this really beneficial that 61% of high school boys have the right to tell women, fictional or otherwise, to cover up. Where I come from, girls are fighting their own schools to say, no, if I want to wear shorts on a hot day, and these are shorts that I have bought in a store and I have not altered, you have no right to send me home for obscenity. So this issue is much more complicated than what this article would like you to believe. But there's some positives as well, right? 70% of girls said it doesn't matter, and 78% of boys said it doesn't matter the gender of the protagonist. Well, if it doesn't matter, then it doesn't matter, right? Then that's not the same as saying, I demand to play a female character, I'm not buying a game. That means that the people protesting games like, Assassin's Creed Unity are in the minority, which means developers should stop listening to them. If the majority of people do not care what gender the protagonist is, well, it's not a selling point either way, and developers should be able to do what they want. Now, more interestingly, girls care more about playing as a female character as they age. So now what we need is studies of adults who are actually the target age group for the games they're claiming are sending, bad signals to kids who they're not made for. And then, of course, Gamergate. Oh, no. Like, seriously, time. The gate dropping is getting kind of excessive. But, 26% of girls played first-person shooter games. That's fairly low. This would be more compelling to me if I saw 26% of girls played shooters compared to how many boys play shooters. 36% played role-playing games like Skyrim and Grand Theft Auto. Grand Theft Auto is a role-playing game? Really? Grand Theft Auto is a role-playing game. News to me, and I write about games. Well, thank you, Rosalind Wiseman, for telling me that Grand Theft Auto is a role-playing game. 17% played sports games like FIFA and Madden, and FIFA added women. Hey, yay. 19% did not play games compared to 3% of boys. Why do we suddenly get the comparison at the end of this? I'm not saying there's anything amiss here, but these are the sort of things I say, first of all, there's an outright mistake in calling Grand Theft Auto an RPG. Grand Theft Auto is not an RPG. It's an open world action game. And somebody who's been studying gaming for 4 whole years should probably know this, right? Excuse my snark. I had to hold back on the kids because they're kids. So now it's all coming out, right? But these are things like this that call everything else into question. And yeah, it's just one error. But Grand Theft Auto is not a role-playing game. And if Grand Theft Auto was used as an example for kids of a role-playing game, that will skew the number who said, yes, I play role-playing games. And I completely believe that the number of women who play role-playing games is going up increasingly, in recent years because of the BioWare games, and because of a lot of women I know play Skyrim, a lot of women I know play Fallout, and it's that open world sandboxy kind of thing. But it's still only 36%. So how many are boys? This is the question that we keep getting hung up on, which is why I think that people don't really care the gender of the protagonist matters more, because at some point you have to stop going by statistics and start going, this is art and we have a story we want to tell, and we're going to ignore the data for artistic reasons within reason, right? And that is the tricky part of games, when people start dictating what games should be. And then we get into the Gamergate controversy, which I don't know what that has to do with interviewing 13-year-olds who are supposed to just be getting Facebook, but let's look at what was said. Revealed intense sexism among some self-identified gamers. As I have been saying from the beginning of the Gamergate controversy, sexism is not a gaming problem. Sexism is a human problem. There will be some of any group who are sexist. And I mean, God, I dared to tweet a politician a few weeks ago. You want to see garbage? Tweeted a politician. All the yahoos come out of the woodwork. They're all the radicals. You know, it's not Kate Upton. Oh, girls, if you think, I never want to see that. Well, Kate Upton wasn't created by gamers, ladies. Kate Upton's a bikini model. She has social status outside of gaming. That's why the game company hired her to sell their game to casuals. Okay? It's not gaming. It's not gaming. But would the young people who identified gamers share any of these sentiments? Well, some will and some won't because they're people. Very few of our respondents knew what Gamergate was. Thank God. And they had many different responses from what one may expect. Well, this isn't surprising if you're a gamer. What comes next? 55% of boys who identify as gamers think there should be more female heroes in games. And 57% believe that female characters are too often treated as sex objects. Okay, 55% of boys who identify as gamers think there should be more female heroes in games. Here's the problem with that, guys. If you use a third-person view and have them running, then somebody's going to complain that you get to look at their butt the whole time. It's a no-win situation right now. What researchers like Rosalind Wiseman and company don't realize is that game companies are not avoiding female protagonists because they think people don't want to play as them. It is much more likely, the boardrooms do say that is true, but it's not coming from the developers. The fear among developers is not that people don't want them to do it. They're afraid of doing it wrong and offending somebody and getting that criticism that, oh, they don't like how the female characters sit in Destiny, or we don't like how Catwoman runs, or all this stuff. It's back to the phenomenon I pointed out earlier. This. No one cares that Liu Kang's not wearing a shirt, even though it looks like the cast of Magic Mike, because of greater societal gender perception differences. And if you're going to rag on the women of Mortal Kombat, we have to confront the fact that our culture sees absolutely nothing wrong with a man not wearing a shirt, but we take issue with a woman wearing this, which was a shirt the last time I noticed. So we have to keep these dialogues going, and we have to have real conversations of why this is apparently so much worse than this. Because it's nonsensical on its face. Why is a male nipple fine and a female nipple means society is ending? Ask somebody that question. They usually don't have an answer because, right? And these are the things that having discussions about gender and doing feminist analysis and all this stuff, this is the stuff we drill down into. Okay, and these are the questions that we want to ask, and we're trying to get away from the, well, it's just not natural question, or it's just not right. It's just not right. It's wrong. Why? Let's be logical about this. Like, let's stop the knee jerking. Let's stop relying on our assumptions that are culturally affected, and really look at why it's okay for Liu Kang to wear no freaking shirt and a wrestling belt. Sorry, it's just funny. And we bash Kitana for having bits of her sides showing. I mean, they tone down the costumes for Mortal Kombat 10, not to appeal to kids. So I hope that was a bit of thought stimulation. And I think it's great that teenage boys care so much about the depiction of women in games. Now, if we can turn down the judgment slider more and let girls decide for girls what they feel comfortable wearing and what they see as an expression of dignity and what they want to communicate to the world being validated, then we really might be onto something.